So, Michael, Popok Legal AF, ever heard of third-party voter registration organizations, 3PVROs? Well, you're going to hear about them on this hot take. Ron DeSantis's consistent assault on voting rights in Florida, and what a federal judge in the Northern District of Florida, the Chief Judge, Mark Walker, has once again set up a firewall to protect democracy from fascists like Ron DeSantis going after 3PVROs because he doesn't want them registering Democrats and independents. So he's putting up more and more barriers, just as he has before, to First Amendment, 14th Amendment constitutional rights of people and the voters of Florida. What are you scared of, Ron DeSantis? You're afraid if there's more registration and easier access to the ballot box, more voter participation, then you won't win the governorship again, or you won't win the presidency. You're probably right about that. But this isn't the way to do it. And you have reached, again, your what looks to be your arch nemesis, which is the chief judge of the Northern District of Florida up in Tallahassee, the state capital. Mark Walker, who over the last 4 or 5 years has really been lighting the torch of liberty about voting rights. He's a voting right fanatic in a positive way, and he makes sure that Florida hews to the straight and narrow and doesn't violate the constitutional rights of its citizens and doesn't find continued ways to undermine voter participation. In the current case brought by the NAACP and a Hispanic group, both of which are responsible for getting out the vote, voter registration, voter information to get people engaged and voting. Sounds like a good thing, but not in Ron DeSantis's Florida. It's a bad thing. And there was a law that was about to take effect on July 1st, except Judge Walker issued his injunction in that case, NAACP versus Cobb Bird up in Florida, which says that the law that was being proposed, which would have done two things. One, it would have made every person who's involved with voter registration would have to be an American citizen. I'm not talking about illegal aliens here, okay? But under Ron DeSantis's law that his rubber stamping legislature passed, in order to have the job to get paid, to go out and knock on doors and other engagements to get voter participation and voter registration to happen, you'd have to be an American citizen. Not enough if you were here on a legal, proper immigration status, whatever that was, green card and otherwise. If you have a green card or otherwise, except for some limited statuses where you're not allowed to have a job, although you can volunteer, if you're a student, for instance, this makes absolutely no sense. In fact, Judge Walker said, in order for you to get over the strict scrutiny, which is a term of art for the highest level of scrutiny that a federal court applies to things related to fundamental constitutional rights, in this case, the 14th Amendment Equal Protection Clause and the First Amendment, right? Your freedom of speech, your freedom to vote for whom you choose, and your freedom to work for an organization and recruit people and try to activate and promote voting. That's a First Amendment right. You have that right in this country, whether you are a U.S. citizen or any other status for which you are in this country. Our Constitution protects all. Justice is blind, except in Florida, where it's not, except where federal judges time and time again have to step in and give Ron DeSantis another black eye and another loss as he continues to try to pass these fascist laws so that he can run on them and say, I'm gonna make America Florida. God forbid. Heaven forbid he was able to take the blueprint he's using in Florida and impress it on the rest of the country. The Constitution would be in tatters at his feet as he did that, and he's been called out again for the 5th or 6th time in the last 4 years by Judge Mark Walker in this decision, in which he entered an injunction, the judge, against the law that would have done two things. One, as I said before, only citizens in Florida are able to register voters. Why? How is that reasonably related or strict scrutiny related to a legitimate public policy? Because you have to have that Ron, in order to get over the constitutional hurdle, that little thing called the Constitution. If you're a government and you're going to violate the law and the equal protection laws and the First Amendment, you better show that there is some sort of tight relationship between a legitimate public policy and a narrowly tailored law. Your law is not narrowly tailored. All citizen. Why? For what reason? And the only thing they could come up with, by the way, on that issue in the court, as cited by the judge in the record, is Florida said, "Oh, we're having a problem with late submitted voter registration, so we're going to ban all non-citizens." I don't get the link. Citizen registrars can't screw up the timing of submitting the registration. It's just a problem with non-citizens. Why can't non-citizens learn the rules, the law, the rules of the road, train other people, go out and register people? I don't get it. And the judge didn't get it either. The second attack that Ron DeSantis has made in his legislation, which the judge called an assault on voting rights in Florida, once again, a full frontal assault on voting rights, to use his phrase, is he said that it's going to be a felony. So everybody's on the hot takes probably thinking, oh, this will be good, Popok. Tell me about the crime. It's going to be a felony for third-party voter registration organizations to retain any voter information. That's it. That's the law. So how does the organization, the judge posited, how is the organization going to continue to encourage people to vote, follow up with them after registration? Registration's one thing. That happens months, 2 months before the actual election day. How about getting them to the polls? As the church likes to say, getting the souls to the polls. How do you do that? If you're not able to retain their address, their email address, where they live, their phone number, and phone them and say, hey, fill in the blank, you registered a couple of months ago, Tuesday's the election. Do you know where your polling place is? Do you know where your precinct is? Do you know the absentee ballot process or the drop-off for mail-in ballot process? These are legitimate policies of organizations just like the NAACP and the Hispanic Federation, who are the plaintiffs in the case, and everybody else. And you, DeSantis, are interfering with their ability to recruit new members and to accomplish their mission, so the judge said, and therefore you have violated their constitutional rights under the First and 14th Amendment at least. And I'm going to put a stop to your this law. You want to appeal me up to the 11th Circuit, which kind of trends Republican, go ahead. But in the meantime, the law is enjoined. And then he took a pot shot, Judge Walker, because Judge Walker and DeSantis have been tangling for a long time. DeSantis, when reached about a loss with Judge Walker in another case, said, who was the judge? Judge Walker? Oh, it's no surprise that I lost there. He's losing time and time again at the hands of the chief judge. DeSantis isn't doing that much better at the 11th Circuit at all. He had a couple of wins related to COVID and masks, but generally his policies against transgender people have gone down in flames. Ron DeSantis's, after the George Floyd BLM movement rise, tried to pass a anti-riot statute in Florida, which sends a chill down my spine, because that's exactly what the South, the Jim Crow South, including Florida, did during the 50s and 60s during the civil rights movement, when people were peacefully protesting. Martin Luther King, the walk over the bridge in Selma and all of that. We've seen the movies, you've read the textbooks, but what was really happening there is that states like Florida, if you got together and assembled, freedom of assembly, one of our constitutional rights, and you expressed your First Amendment right of speech, you were arrested because you violated a riot statute. And Judge Walker is the one, of course, that brought that law down and closed the books on that law in Florida, but cited the 1950s and 1960s history that DeSantis obviously never learned or wanted to forget when he passed his law. So we have Judge Walker over and over again being the counterweight, the counterpunch to Ron DeSantis and his aspirations to leave the U.S. Constitution in tatters, because he's got the numbers in his own state house filled with Republicans, 70% of them, make up the state house. And so he can pass anything. He could take a piece of paper, wipe his backside, hand it to the Republicans in the legislature in Florida, and they're going to sign it because they're all bootlickers for Ron DeSantis. The judge, in the opinion that just got issued, in a 58-page opinion, issuing the injunction on behalf of the two plaintiffs statewide to stop these two ridiculous, unconstitutional, disgusting voting rights laws. No non-citizens can register people to vote. Well, they can now since Judge Walker issued his injunction. And you can't retain voter information, so you can't make contact with anybody and get them actually to the polls to vote. Both those laws are now sidelined, subject to whatever Ron DeSantis does next at the appellate court for the 11th Circuit. And Judge Walker took a very pointed pot shot, well-deserved, at Ron DeSantis in his order, and I'm going to read from it. He said a couple of things in the order. He started it with the one line. He said that Florida, this case arises out of Florida's latest assault on the right to vote. That's the first line of the order. The case arises out of Florida's latest assault on the right to vote. And so Ron DeSantis didn't have to read much beyond that first line to know that he was going to be on the losing end of Judge Walker's decision. But Judge Walker went on. He said however, the challenged provisions, the two that I told you about, citizens can't register people to vote. Non-citizens can't, only citizens. And you can't retain voter information to do follow-up. They exemplify something, according to the judge, Florida has struggled with in recent years. Namely, governing within the bounds set by the United States Constitution. But he went on. Judge Walker also said, and here's the snide, stick it in the eye of Ron DeSantis, quote, "The free state of Florida is simply not free to exceed the bounds of the United States Constitution." Because that's all you hear from Ron DeSantis and Casey DeSantis, the first lady in waiting. She thinks she's going to be the next coming of Camelot, with her, outfits that parrot Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis, or Jacqueline Kennedy at the time, and trying to make him to be the next JFK. To paraphrase Lloyd Benson, I know a lot about JFK. I never met him, but I studied him in college and in a master's program. And you, sir, are no JFK. And so, because there was no judge that would ever write something about the Democrats or John F. Kennedy like Judge Walker just wrote about Governor DeSantis. So Governor DeSantis, when he's on the campaign trail, constantly talks about the free state of Florida. He puts it on T-shirts and motorcycle jackets and all sorts of silly things. But what he's really trying to say is his state, under his governorship, is out of control, has run amok, and uses the U.S. Constitution as a doormat to wipe his feet. And that is not proper. And that is why our justice system, maybe sometimes late, maybe sometimes not moving as quickly as people would like, is there for us to bring down tyrants like Governor DeSantis, so that non-citizens can get paid to register voters, to activate the vote, to make sure that voters show up on the right day for election, to counter misinformation that is all over Facebook and other platforms, telling people that it's not this Tuesday, it's last Tuesday, it's next Thursday, it's a Friday at noon. That's when you vote. And believe me, that's out there. That's part of some recent sentencing of some criminals who tried to stop at least and were successful in getting at least 5,000 people not to vote because they gave them misinformation about the day and the proper place to vote. And these are the organizations, NAACP, the Hispanic Federation, and all these three PVROs, third-party voter registration organizations that do God's business, right, on the side of the angels in not only getting people to register, but getting them to vote, right? Nobody ever won the presidency because their party out-registered the other party. They won because their party got more votes than the other party. Yes, you have to register first, but you have to vote. And how do you get people to vote without getting their information and following up with them? And so the felony that Florida has enacted against, basically, these are all anti-democrat, small d, and anti-democratic, small d, provisions to try to get at the Democrats, big D, in Florida so they can continue to keep that state as red as possible. I lived in Florida for 20 years down in Miami. When I was there, I'm not saying there's a link, but when I was there, Barack Obama won twice. That state could flip from red to blue. There is a huge Hispanic population that runs down the spine of Florida through the I-4 corridor, starting in Orlando and ending down in Miami-Dade County. And the Democratic Party has to continue to fight for the soul of the party, the Democratic Party in Florida, and try to get Hispanic voters back because they have now been co-opted by MAGA Trump. You hear it on Spanish language radio. You hear it in the campaigns down there. They have done a great job at getting newly minted Republican MAGA voters down in South Florida. And that counteracts the base of Democratic voters in Palm Beach, Broward, and Dade County. And if Biden can't rack up and overperform, as they say, in South Florida to counteract the ruby red part of the state, which is the rest, he can't win Florida. Now, he can win of course, he can win re-election without Florida, but wouldn't it be nice? Wouldn't it be easier if the Democrats could count on Florida again? It starts in the courtroom, but it ends in the ballot box with the ballot box. And that is why decisions like Judge Walker's, right, in NAACP versus Cord Bird, enjoining these two provisions of a new law, anti-voting rights law by DeSantis are so important. I'm going to follow them right here only on the MeidasTouch network. I do it about every day on hot takes just like this one. We pull it all together. There's another major long-form podcast you may like, if you like these kind of hot takes, that I co-anchor on Wednesdays and Saturdays on the MeidasTouch network called Legal AF. If you like what I'm doing, follow me on social media, including Threads, at MS Popok. This is Michael Popok, Legal AF, reporting.
Hey, Meidas Mighty. Love this report? Continue the conversation by following us on Instagram, at MeidasTouch, to keep up with the most important news of the day. What are you waiting for? Follow us now.